December of 1876. Wind came off the Yellowstone River like a blade, cutting through wool and skin alike. Ezra Calloway had been wintering his herd in that valley for 2 months without speaking more than a dozen words to another soul. That's how he liked it. Then he heard the crying, a child's cry, thin and desperate, carried on wind that could freeze a man's breath before it left his mouth. Ezra looked up from the fire, coffee cup halfway to his lips. The sound came again, closer. He found her at the fence line, collapsed in snow up to her waist. 8 years old, maybe 9. Blonde hair frozen stiff with ice. She clutched a piece of paper in her mittened hand like it was the only warm thing left in the world. When Ezra lifted her, she weighed almost nothing. The paper was a deed, half of one. Torn clean through the middle, she opened her mouth to speak. No sound came out. 3 days earlier, Ezra had been counting cattle at dawn when the blizzard rolled in. He'd lost sight of the herd within minutes, could barely see his own hands in front of his face. The kind of storm that killed men and animals without prejudice. He'd ridden the fence line twice, making sure every post still stood. The wind howled like something alive and angry. Snow came sideways, stinging on his skin. His horse's breath froze in white plumes that vanished instantly. That's when he'd heard it. Faint, almost lost in the wind. A child crying. Ezra had turned his horse toward the sound, squinting through the white. At first he thought his mind was playing tricks. 2 months alone could do that to a man, make him hear things that weren't there. But then he saw her, small figure in the snow, dark coat against white ground, moving slow, falling, getting up, falling again. He'd dismounted and run, his boots crunched through the frozen crust. When he reached her, she looked up at him with eyes that held more years than her face should carry. She tried to speak. Her lips moved. Nothing came out but a small, broken sound. Ezra had wrapped her in his coat and carried her back to camp. She held onto that piece of paper the whole way, wouldn't let go even when her fingers started to thaw, and the pain must have been considerable. Now she sat by his fire, wrapped in his bedroll. He'd peeled off her frozen outer layers, careful as he could. Her dress underneath was thin, patched in 3 places. Her boots had holes in the soles. Ezra heated milk in a tin pan. The smell of it filled the tent, sweet and warm against the metallic cold of the air outside. He poured it into a cup and held it out to her. She took it with both hands, drank slow. "You got a name?" he asked. She stared at him. Her lips moved again. No sound. Ezra nodded. "That's all right. You can tell me when you're ready." He waited until she finished the milk. Then he held out his hand. "Can I see that paper?" She hesitated. Her fingers tightened on it. "Just for a minute," Ezra said. "I'll give it right back." She let go slow, watching his face the whole time like she expected him to throw it in the fire. Ezra smoothed the paper on his knee. It was a homestead deed, federal issue, dated 1868, plot number and description written in careful script. The name at the bottom made his breath catch. Thomas and Eliza Brennan. He knew that name. He'd ridden cattle with Tom Brennan 7, 8 years back. Good man, honest. They'd trailed a herd from Texas to Montana together, sleeping rough under the same stars, sharing coffee and hardtack for 4 months straight. Tom had talked about his homestead, about his wife and baby girl, about the future he was building. Ezra looked at the child, blonde hair like Tom's had been, blue eyes. "You're Tom Brennan's daughter," he said. She nodded once. "Quick, where is he? Where's your folks?" Her eyes filled. She shook her head, kept shaking it. Ezra felt something cold settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the weather outside. "They gone?" Another nod. Tears spilled over, but she made no sound, not even a sob. He looked back at the deed. The paper was torn clean through the middle. Jagged edge, like someone had ripped it deliberate. The bottom right corner was missing entirely. "Who tore this?" Ezra asked. She didn't answer, just pulled the bedroll tighter around her shoulders and stared at the fire. Ezra set the deed down, careful between them. "You hold on to that. It's yours." She picked it up immediately, folded it small, and tucked it inside her dress. Outside, the wind picked up again. Canvas snapped and rattled. Cattle lowed in the darkness, restless. Ezra poured himself coffee. It was cold already, bitter on his tongue. He drank it anyway. "You can stay here long as you need," he said, "till the storm breaks. Then we'll figure out what's next." She looked at him steady, old eyes and a young face. He wanted to ask more, where she'd been, how she'd ended up alone in a blizzard, what happened to Tom and Eliza, but her eyes were closing, exhaustion pulling her under. Ezra added wood to the fire, the smell of pine smoke mixed with coffee and wet wool. He listened to the child's breathing, even out into sleep. That deed was worth something. 320 acres just north of the rail line. Valuable land, valuable enough to kill for. The storm broke on the third day. Ezra woke to silence, the kind that only comes after days of wind. Sunlight cut through the tent flap, sharp and cold. The girl was awake already, sitting up in the bedroll, watching him. "We need supplies," Ezra said. "Town's 5 miles. You up for a ride?" She nodded. He saddled his horse and lifted her up in front of him. She was light as a bird. He could feel her ribs through her dress. They rode into Silver Creek just past noon. The town was a collection of false front buildings huddled against the cold. Freight wagons lined the main street, waiting for the rail line that had pushed through 6 months earlier. Ezra tied his horse at the general store. He helped the girl down, and she stayed close to his leg as they walked inside. The storekeeper looked up from his counter. His eyes went to the girl, then to Ezra. Something flickered across his face. "Need beans, coffee, and flour," Ezra said. "Got a list." He was counting coins on the counter when the door opened behind them. The man who walked in wore a fur-lined coat that probably cost more than Ezra made in a year. Gold watch chain across his vest, boots polished to a shine despite the mud outside. Hiram Good. Ezra had seen him around town, owned the freight company, had his fingers in land deals all over the territory. Good's eyes locked on the girl. "Well," he said, his voice carried across the store. "Look what the storm blew in." The girl pressed closer to Ezra's leg. "She with you, Drover?" Good asked. "She is," Ezra said. "Interesting." Good stepped closer. The smell of cologne and tobacco came with him. "You know who this child is?" "I know." "Then you know she's got no legal claim to be wandering around free. Orphans go to territorial custody, that's the law." Ezra felt his jaw tighten. "Her folks had a homestead. That makes her an heir." Good smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Her folks abandoned that homestead. Federal documents say so." "Tom Brennan didn't abandon nothing." "You knew him?" "I did." "Then maybe you should have kept better track of his daughter." Good looked at the storekeeper. "Sam, go fetch Deputy Webb. Tell him we got a situation." The storekeeper hesitated, then went. Ezra's hand moved to the girl's shoulder. "This ain't a situation. This is a child who needs help. This is a child making false claims to valuable land." Goody pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. "Land that's been legally abandoned." By the time Deputy Webb arrived, a crowd had gathered outside, 20, 30 people. Word traveled fast in a small town. Webb was a lean man with tired eyes. He looked at Ezra, then at Good, then at the paper Good held out. "Federal abandonment notice," Good said. "Filed 6 months ago. The Brennan homestead reverted to territorial jurisdiction. I've already submitted a claim." Webb read the paper, his mouth pressed into a thin line. Ezra felt the girl's hand grip his coat. "She's got her parents' deed," he said. "Let's see it," Webb said. Ezra looked down. The girl pulled the folded paper from inside her dress. Her hands shook as she held it out. Webb took it, smoothed it flat. His eyebrows rose. "This is torn," he said. "Someone ripped it," Ezra said. "Convenient." Good's voice was smooth. "Half a deed, no seal visible, no witness signatures, and a child who won't even speak to verify her own identity." The crowd murmured. Ezra heard the words clearly. Drover, drifter, land grab. Webb folded both papers. "Mr. Calloway, do you have legal standing to represent this child? I'm trying to help her." "That's not what I asked." Ezra said nothing. Webb's expression was pained. "Mr. Good has federal documentation. Properly filed, properly sealed. You've got half a piece of paper and a child who can't speak for herself." He paused. "I'm going to have to ask you to prove her claim by March 15th. That's 90 days. 90 days? Ezra's voice rose. "Federal homestead law, 180 days to prove abandonment. That notice was filed last September." Webb looked at the girl. His voice softened. "I'm sorry, but that's the law." Good stepped forward. He smiled at the crowd. "I built this town's freight line, brought jobs, brought civilization, and now a drifter shows up with a convenient orphan and a torn paper, trying to steal what's been legally processed." He turned to Ezra. "If you can prove her claim by the deadline, fine. If not, you'll face obstruction charges, and the child goes to territorial custody." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Ezra saw faces he recognized from previous trips to town. None of them met his eyes now. Webb handed the torn deed back to the girl. She took it with both hands. "March 15th, Webb said quietly. "That's all I can give you." Ezra lifted the girl up. Her arms went around his neck. He carried her out through the crowd. People stepped back as he passed. The smell of wood smoke and horse manure hung in the cold air. Somewhere a dog barked. He set her on his horse and climbed up behind her. As they rode out of town, Good's voice carried across the street. "You've already lost, Drover. You just don't know it yet." They made camp that night, 10 miles from town. Ezra built the fire, bigger than usual. The girl sat close to it, staring at the flames. He heated beans in a pan. The smell of salt pork and molasses rose with the steam. He gave her a plate, and she ate slow, methodical. "We're going back tomorrow," Ezra said. "Different place, telegraph office." She looked up at him. "Woman who runs it, Nora Whitfield. She's got no love for Hiram Good." The girl's expression didn't change. "I need you to trust me," Ezra said. "Can you do that?" She nodded once. They rode into Silver Creek at first light. The telegraph office sat at the edge of town, a small wooden building with a tin roof. Ezra could hear the click of the telegraph key before they reached the door. The woman inside was maybe 40, dark hair pulled back, ink stains on her fingers. She looked up when they entered. "Ezra Calloway," she said. "Heard you had some trouble yesterday. Word travels. Always does." Nora's eyes went to the girl. Something softened in her face. "This is the Brennan child?" "Annie," Ezra said, or saying her name's Annie. It was the first time he'd said it out loud. The girl, Annie, looked at him. Her eyes were wet. Nora came around the counter. She knelt in front of Annie. "I'm sorry about your folks, sweetheart. I knew your mother a little. She was kind to me." Annie's lips trembled. Nora stood. Her voice went hard. "Good?" "He's got federal papers," Ezra said. "Abandonment notice. Says the Brennans deserted the homestead." "That's a lie." "I know it. You know it. But the law doesn't care what we know." Nora walked to the window. She stared out at the street. "My husband fought Good over a boundary dispute 5 years back. Land survey showed Good had moved fence posts in the night, claimed 20 acres that weren't his." She paused. "My husband died 3 months later. Horse spooked and threw him, broke his neck." Ezra said nothing. "They called it an accident," Nora continued. "Maybe it was. Or maybe Good's got men who know how to make accidents happen." The telegraph key started clicking. Nora went to it, pulled paper from the machine. She read it quickly and set it aside. "I can send messages," she said. "Territorial capital, federal land office, but it takes time. We've got 90 days. "Then I'll start now." She looked at Annie. "You got anything besides that torn deed? Letters, documents, anything with your parents' names?" Annie shook her head. The door opened. A man stepped inside. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a long black coat dusted with road dirt. He carried a leather satchel and moved with the careful tiredness of someone who'd been riding for days. "Reverend Ashford," Nora said. "Didn't expect you till Sunday." "Changed my route." The Reverend set his satchel down. His eyes found Annie, and he went very still. "Dear God." Annie shrank back against Ezra. The Reverend stepped forward slow. "Eliza's girl," he said. His voice cracked. "You're Eliza's girl." Ezra's hand went to Annie's shoulder. "You knew her mother? I baptized this child." The Reverend knelt. 8 years ago. Little church up north. Your mother sang hymns while I poured the water. Your father held you after and cried." He looked at Ezra. "Where are Thomas and Eliza?" "Dead," Ezra said. 3 years ago, near as I can figure." The Reverend closed his eyes. "God have mercy." "You got records?" Nora asked. "Baptismal records?" "At the mission church, 50 miles north." The Reverend opened his eyes. "But the pass is snowed in. Won't clear till late February at earliest." Ezra felt something loosen in his chest. "But you got records, written proof of who she is." "I do. Names, dates, witnesses, all in the church ledger." The Reverend looked at Annie. "Your mother's maiden name was Morrison. Your father's middle name was William. You were born in 68, I remember because it was the same year the treaty was signed." Annie's hand found Ezra's. She squeezed tight. "Can you write that down?" Ezra asked. "Testify to it?" "I can, but without the ledger, it's just my word, and Good will have lawyers." "Your word's worth something," Nora said. "More than Good's money." The Reverend stood. He touched Annie's head gentle. "Child, can you speak at all?" Annie opened her mouth. Her lips moved. Nothing came out. Tears ran down her face. "It's all right," the Reverend said. "The Lord hears silent prayers just as loud." He looked at Ezra. "You're taking care of her?" "Best I can." "Then I'll ride to the mission as soon as the pass clears. I'll bring that ledger back if I have to dig through 10 feet of snow to reach it." Nora turned back to her telegraph. I'll send word to the territorial office. Tell them we've got a witness to the child's identity. Maybe that buys us time. Ezra picked Annie up. She wrapped her arms around his neck. Thank you, he said to both of them. Outside, the sun was higher now, warmer. The sound of wagons on the street mixed with voices. Somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil. Ezra set Annie on his horse. As he climbed up behind her, he saw a figure watching from across the street. Hiram Good, standing in front of his freight office, smiling. 2 weeks passed. Ezra kept his camp and his herd and tried not to think about deadlines. Annie stayed close. She helped where she could, gathering firewood, fetching water from the river. She never spoke, but her eyes followed everything. Ezra taught her small things, how to read cattle brands in the firelight, how to tell weather by the way the smoke moved, how to tie a drover's knot with rope. Loop goes under, he said, guiding her small fingers. Then back through. See? That's trust. One piece of rope holding another. She tried 3 times, failed twice. On the 3rd attempt, the knot held. Ezra felt something warm move through his chest. There you go. You remember that knot. It'll serve you when words won't. Annie touched the finished knot. Then she looked up at him and smiled. Small, but real. That night, the wolves came. Ezra woke to cattle bawling in panic. He grabbed his rifle and ran out into darkness. The herd was scattering, breaking in 3 directions at once. He could hear them crashing through brush, splashing across the shallow parts of the river. He fired twice into the air. The sound echoed off the hills. The attack stopped as suddenly as it started. By dawn, Ezra had counted his losses. 30 head missing, maybe more scattered so far he'd never find them. $900 gone into the darkness. He stood by the river as the sun came up. The smell of wet earth and crushed sage hung in the cold air. He could see tracks in the mud. Too many tracks, too organized, not wolves, men. Annie appeared beside him. She looked at the tracks, then at his face. Good, Ezra said. She nodded like she'd known all along. 3 days later, Nora sent word. Come to the telegraph office. Urgent. Ezra rode in with Annie. The streets were busy, freight wagons loading, men shouting, hammers ringing from the blacksmith's shop, the smell of coal smoke and horse manure thick in the February air. Nora's face was tight when they walked in. She held a telegram in her hand. Territorial Records Office, she said. They confirmed your suspicions. Ezra waited. That abandonment notice Good filed. It was backdated. Federal clerk named Oswald Pierce took a payment, made it look like the Brennans abandoned their claim 6 months before they died. Ezra felt his hands curl into fists. So it's fraud. It's fraud. But here's the problem. Nora set the telegram down. The original homestead filing, the one that would prove the Brennans' continuous claim, it was destroyed in a fire. What fire? Freight office. November of 73, 3 years ago, week after your friends died. Nora's voice went quiet. They said a lantern tipped over, burned half the building, lost a lot of records. Convenient. More than convenient. Nora looked at Annie. Without that original filing, we can't prove when the homestead was established. Can't prove continuous occupation. The baptismal record will prove who you are, but it won't prove the land claim. Ezra stared at the telegram. The words blurred in front of his eyes. So even if we prove the notice is forged, we still can't prove she's entitled to the land, not without a living witness who can testify to the claim's validity. The door opened. Deputy Webb stepped inside. His face was drawn. Got the same telegram, he said. Federal investigators coming, but he won't arrive till April at earliest. He looked at Ezra. And your deadline's March 15th. That's 4 weeks, Ezra said. I know. The pass won't even clear till late February. I know that too. Webb took off his hat. I'm sorry, Calloway. I don't like Good any more than you do, but I enforce the law, and the law says, if you can't prove that claim by March 15th, the child goes to territorial custody, and the land goes to auction. Annie's hand found Ezra's coat. She gripped it tight. Webb looked at her. Can you speak, child? At all? Annie opened her mouth. Her lips formed words. Nothing came out but a small, broken sound. Webb's jaw worked. Reverend Ashford's testimony will help, but without documents or a living parent. Her parents are dead, Ezra said. Then God help you both. Webb put his hat back on and left. The telegraph key started clicking. Nora went to it, read the incoming message. Her face went pale. What? Ezra asked. Town meeting, tonight. Good's calling it. Says he's got new evidence about the Brennan claim. She looked up. He's going to make his case public. That evening, half the town packed into the church. Ezra stood at the back with Annie. The smell of wood polish and candle wax filled the air. People whispered and pointed. Good stood at the front. He wore his best suit, gold watch chain gleaming. "Friends," he said, his voice carried to every corner. "I've been patient. I've followed the law. But now it's time to speak plainly." He pulled papers from his pocket. Thomas and Eliza Brennan filed for their homestead in '68, but they never completed the improvement requirements, never built a permanent structure, never proved continuous occupation for 5 years. He held up the abandonment notice. That's why the federal government issued this notice. Legal, proper, by the book. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Now a drover comes to town with a child who won't speak in half a piece of paper. Claims she's the heir. But where's the proof? Good's eyes swept the room. I've got federal documents. He's got a story. I've got investment capital to develop that land. He's got a herd he can't even keep together. Someone in the crowd laughed. Ezra felt Annie press against his leg. Good pointed at them. That man is using that child to make a land grab. And when he fails, we'll all watch him ride out of here the same way he rode in, with nothing. The crowd erupted, half arguing, half agreeing, voices rising over voices. Ezra picked Annie up and carried her out. Outside, the air was cold. Stars filled the sky. The sound of the crowd faded behind them. Annie's face was buried in his shoulder. He felt her shaking. "I'm not riding out," Ezra said. "You hear me? I made a promise to your daddy. I'm keeping it." She pulled back, looked at him. Her eyes asked the question her voice couldn't. "How?" Ezra had no answer. March came in cold and wet. The snow turned to slush. The river ice began to crack and groan at night. Ezra could smell the change coming, mud and thaw and the promise of spring still weeks away. He counted his money by firelight. $14. The herd scatter had cost him more than cattle. He'd spent days tracking strays, lost time, lost wages. The land office filing fee was $10. To file a formal protest against Good's claim, to buy them time, that left $4. Beans and coffee till spring, if the herd didn't scatter again, if nothing else went wrong. Ezra looked at his saddle. Custom made, 20 years old, leather worn smooth in all the right places, worth maybe $18 to the right buyer. He rode into town the next morning. Annie sat in front of him. She'd gained a little weight. Her face had more color now. She still didn't speak, but she hummed sometimes. Quiet. Under her breath, Marcus Tate ran the cattle buying office. He looked up when Ezra walked in. "Calloway, heard about your trouble." "Need to sell something," Ezra said. Tate's eyes went to the saddle. "That's a good piece of leather." "It is." "How much you want?" 18. Tate walked around it slow. Checked the stitching, the stirrups. "I'll give you 15. Ezra's jaw tightened. "It's worth 18. To you, maybe. To me, it's 15. Tate pulled out a cash box. "Take it or leave it." Ezra took it. He filed the protest motion at the land office. The clerk barely looked at him, stamped the paper, $10 gone. Outside, Annie was waiting with the horse. Ezra had tied his old saddle behind it. The new arrangement felt wrong, unbalanced. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." They rode north. The smell of wet earth rose up from the trail. Patches of brown showed through the white. The wind had shifted, warmer now. At camp, Ezra built up the fire. He heated beans and hardtack. Annie ate slow, watching him. "I want to teach you something," Ezra said. He pulled a coil of rope from his pack, showed her the brands on his cattle, the marks burned into their hides. Each one a story, each one proof of ownership. "See that?" He pointed to a cow near the fire. "Rocking Bee. That's mine. Bought her in Texas. Trailed her north. She's got my mark." Annie nodded. "Now you try. Tell me what you see." She walked to the herd, came back and pointed to another cow. Her lips moved. "Say it," Ezra said. "Out loud." Annie's face went tight. She tried. Her mouth formed the words. "Rock." The sound caught in her throat. She tried again. "Rocking Bee." It came out rough, barely more than a whisper, but it came out. Ezra felt his chest go tight. "That's it. That's good." Annie's eyes filled. She touched her throat like she couldn't believe the sound had come from there. "Words are like knots," Ezra said. "You practice till they hold." She tried again. "Rocking Bee." Clearer this time. Ezra smiled. "You're learning." The next morning, Annie disappeared. Ezra found her down by the river. She was kneeling in the mud, digging at something with her bare hands. "What are you doing?" he called. She held something up, a flower, tiny and purple. Pushing up through the last of the snow, she carried it back to camp careful, set it on a flat stone near the fire. Then she found a stick and wrote in the dirt, "Thank you," 2 words, clear and careful. Ezra stared at them. "For what?" She pointed to the flower, then to herself, then to him. "For helping you?" he asked. She nodded. Then she spoke. 2 words, her voice still rough but stronger than before. "For trying." Ezra had to look away. His eyes were stinging. "We're not done trying," he said when he could speak again. "Not by a long shot." That afternoon, Nora rode out to the camp. She dismounted and handed Ezra a telegram. "Federal investigators coming," she said, "but not till mid-April." "That's after the deadline." "I know." Nora looked at Annie. "How's she doing?" "She spoke today. First real words." "That's good. That's real good." Nora pulled her coat tighter. The wind was picking up. "Reverend says the pass might clear by next week. He'll ride for the mission as soon as it does." "That gives us maybe 10 days before the deadline." "It's not much. It's what we got." Nora mounted her horse. "Good's been quiet. That worries me. When he's quiet, he's planning." She rode back toward town. Ezra watched until she disappeared. Annie was still looking at the flower. It was already starting to wilt in the cold air, but for a few hours, it had been alive. Proof that winter didn't last forever. Ezra picked up the rope. "Come on, let's practice those knots again." Annie took the rope. Her hands moved slow but sure. Loop under, back through, pull, tight. The knot held. She looked up at him and smiled. Goody came to the camp 3 days later. Ezra heard the horse before he saw the rider. Single mount, walking slow, confident. Annie heard it too. She moved behind Ezra without being told. Goody rode into camp like he owned it. His horse was a tall bay, well-fed. The smell of expensive tobacco drifted down from his coat. "Calloway," Good said. He didn't dismount. "We need to talk." "Nothing to talk about." "I think there is." Good pulled a leather pouch from his saddlebag. It jingled. $500, cash. You take the girl west. Find her a good family. Forget about the land claim." Ezra stood. "No. That's more money than you'll see in 2 years of trailing cattle?" Good's voice was reasonable. Friendly even. "You're not her father. You got no legal standing, no blood claim. You're just a man who picked up a stray in a storm." "I rode with her daddy. Thomas Brennan, Texas to Montana, 4 months on the trail." "I know. I looked into it. You were trail partners. That's all. Doesn't make you family." "Makes me enough." Good shifted in his saddle. "You can't win this, Calloway. I've got lawyers. I've got federal documents. I've got capital and connections." He paused. "What do you have?" "A torn piece of paper and a child who can't speak for herself." "She can speak." "Can she?" Good smiled. "Will she? In front of a judge? Under pressure? I've seen children like her before. Trauma makes them shut down. By the time the law's done asking questions, she'll be mute again." Ezra felt Annie's hand grip his coat. "Take the money," Good said. "Buy yourself a new herd. Start fresh somewhere else. Nobody blames you for trying, but it's over." "I rode with her daddy," Ezra said again. His voice was quiet, steel underneath. "My word's worth more than your money." Good's smile faded. "Then you'll lose everything, your herd, your reputation, and the girl." He gathered his reins. "When they take her to territorial custody, she'll end up in some orphan asylum, or worse, on a train heading east with 50 other unwanted children. Is that what Tom Brennan would have wanted?" "Tom would have wanted me to fight." "Then you're a fool." Good turned his horse. "You've got 8 days till the deadline. Use them to reconsider." He rode out of camp the same way he'd come, slow, confident. Annie came around to face Ezra. Her eyes were wide. "I'm not selling you out," Ezra said. "Not for 500, not for 5,000. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. That night, Ezra couldn't sleep. He lay in his bedroll and listened to the river. The ice was breaking up. He could hear the current running free underneath, the sound of thaw and movement and things coming loose. At dawn, he heard another horse. This one came from the north, riding hard. Ezra grabbed his rifle, stepped outside. The rider was tall, long gray hair, buckskin coat. He sat his horse like he'd been born on it. Ezra lowered the rifle. "Chief Beartrack?" The Crow Elder dismounted. His face was deeply lined, eyes sharp as winter stars. He moved with the careful dignity of a man who'd seen 70 winters. Ezra Calloway, Beartrack said. His voice was deep, accent thick. I heard of drovers fighting for a child's land claim. Word travels fast. Justice travels faster than gossip. Beartrack's eyes went to the tent. The Brennan girl, she's here? She is. I knew her father, Thomas. Good man. We negotiated treaty water rights together, 1870. He respected the old boundaries. Beartrack paused. Most whites don't. Annie stepped out of the tent. She saw Beartrack and went very still. The elder's face changed. Child, he said softly. You remember me? Annie nodded, slow. I looked for you, after the fire, tracked you for 2 days, but by the time I found the trail, you'd already reached the White Town. Beartrack's voice went rough. I rode there twice to check on you, but a Crow Elder asking questions in Silver Creek? They don't welcome that. Ezra stepped forward. You know what happened to her folks? I was there. Beartrack's jaw tightened. Not when it happened, after. I found the wagon the next morning. Goody says they abandoned their claim. They were running from goodsmen. I saw it. Beartrack pulled a rolled paper from inside his coat. This is the treaty survey from '68, shows every homestead boundary in this territory. The Brennan claim is marked here, exact location, exact measurements. Ezra took the map, unrolled it. The paper was old, stiff, but the ink was clear. He could see the plot numbers, the boundary lines, the signature at the bottom. Treaty of 1868, Crow Nation and United States government. This is legal? Ezra asked. It's truth. Sometimes that's louder than legal. Beartrack looked at Annie. Your father asked me, before he died, to watch for you if anything happened to him. I failed. I won't fail twice. Annie's eyes filled with tears. But I'll be honest with you, Beartrack continued. A Crow Elder's word in a white man's court? They'll dismiss it, say I'm biased, say treaty law doesn't matter anymore. He looked at Ezra. We'll need more than my testimony. We'll need white witnesses, legal documents. Reverend's writing for the baptismal record, Ezra said. Should be back in 5 days. 5 days before the deadline? 3. Beartrack nodded slowly. Then we pray the pass holds, and that the Reverend rides fast. The smell of coffee drifted from the fire. Annie poured 3 cups, handed them out without being asked. Beartrack took his and smiled. You're your mother's daughter. She had kind hands, too, Annie spoke. Her voice was still rough, still quiet, but clear. Thank you for coming. The pass cleared on March 10th. Reverend Ashford rode out at first light. Nora came to the camp that afternoon to tell them. He'll be back by the 13th if the weather holds, she said. That gives you 2 days before the deadline. Ezra nodded. 2 days, 48 hours. Not much margin for error. Nora looked at Annie. How are you holding up, sweetheart? Annie was practicing rope knots. Her hands moved steady now, sure. Good, she said. The word came easier than it had a week ago. She's talking more, Ezra said. That'll help. Judge will want to hear from her. Nora pulled her coat tighter. The wind still had teeth in it. Good's been filing papers all week. Affidavits, land surveys. He's building a case. Let him build. Ezra? Nora's voice dropped. Even with the baptismal record and Beartrack's testimony, Good's got money. He'll drag this through territorial court. Could take months, years even. Then we fight for months. Can you afford that? She looked at his herd, smaller now, scattered and thin. You've lost 30 head. You sold your saddle. How much money you got left? Ezra said nothing. Nora's face softened. I'm not saying give up. I'm saying be realistic. This is going to cost more than you've got. After she left, Ezra sat by the fire. The smell of pine smoke mixed with the scent of wet earth. Spring was coming. He could feel it in the air. But spring meant the cattle market would open, and if he didn't get his herd to market soon, he'd lose everything he'd worked for. Annie appeared beside him. She'd been gathering firewood. Her arms were full of dead branches. You should rest, Ezra said. She shook her head, kept working. He watched her stack the wood, careful, methodical. She'd learned so much in 3 months, how to work, how to help, how to be part of something. That night, Ezra did the math by firelight. His remaining herd was worth maybe $3,200. Less if he had to hold them past market peak. The legal fees Nora had mentioned, filing costs, court appearances, document preparation, would run at least $2,000, probably more. He'd have $800 left, maybe. Not enough to start over, not enough to keep a homestead running through the winter. He heard Annie moving in her bedroll, thought she was asleep, then her voice came out of the darkness. How much? Ezra looked over. She was sitting up, her face barely visible in the firelight. How much what? Money, to fight. He hesitated. Don't worry about that. How much? Ezra sighed. More than I got. Annie was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke again. Her voice was stronger now, each word deliberate. Then stop. What? Stop fighting. She pulled the torn deed from inside her dress, held it out. Let him have it. Ezra stood, crossed to her, knelt down. Annie, you'll lose everything. Her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't shake. Your herd, your money, everything, because of me. That's not, it is. A tear ran down her face. I'm not worth it. Ezra felt something crack open in his chest. He took her hands, small and cold in his. Your folks died for that land, he said. They died protecting you and that claim. I won't let their deaths mean nothing. But you'll die too. Maybe not, she struggled for the word, not body die, but the other kind. The kind where you're still walking, but everything inside is gone. Where'd you learn to talk like that? Mama used to say it, about people who gave up. Ezra pulled her close. She buried her face in his shoulder. I made your daddy a promise, he said. Long time ago, on the trail, we were sitting watch one night, and he told me if anything ever happened to him, to look after you and your mama. I said I would. A man's word means something. It has to. Annie pulled back, but that was before nothing. A promise is a promise. She looked at the deed in her hand. This paper killed them. No, greed killed them. Goods greed. That's different. What if we can't prove it? Then we can't, but we'll know we tried. Ezra touched her face, wiped away her tears with his thumb. You're worth fighting for, Annie. Your folks knew it. I know it. And come March 15th, the whole territory's going to know it. And she threw her arms around his neck and held on. They stayed like that for a long time. The fire crackled. The river flowed. Somewhere, an owl called out in the darkness. The next morning, the ice broke. Ezra heard it first, a sound like thunder rolling through the valley. He ran to the riverbank. The ice was cracking in long, jagged lines, sheets of it breaking loose and floating downstream. The water underneath ran dark and fast. Annie stood beside him, watching. Winter's over, Ezra said. Does that mean the Reverend can get back? Should, if the trail holds. They walked back to camp. Bear Track was there. He'd ridden in during the night, slept under the stars. The ice is moving, Ezra told him. Bear Track nodded. Good. The land is waking up. So is the truth. That afternoon, Reverend Ashford rode into camp. His horse was lathered with sweat. The Reverend's face was windburned and exhausted, but he was smiling. He dismounted and pulled a leather-bound book from his saddlebag. The ledger, he said. Every baptism from 65 to 72. Ezra took it, opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded in places, but he could read the entries. He found it on page 47. Annie Elizabeth Brennan, born April 3, 1868, daughter of Thomas William Brennan and Eliza Morrison Brennan, baptized June 15, 1868. Witnesses Samuel Ashford, Clara Johnston, Joseph Beartrack. Ezra looked up. Beartrack was a witness? I was there, the elder said. Your father asked me to stand for you, said he wanted his daughter blessed by both laws, White and Crow. Annie stared at the page. Her finger traced her parents' names. Reverend Ashford sat heavily by the fire. I rode straight through. Pass was clear, but the mud's deep. Nearly lost my horse twice. Ezra handed him coffee. You did good, Reverend. We're not done yet. Ashford looked at Annie. Child, tomorrow we go before the land office. They'll ask you questions you'll need to answer. Can you do that? Annie nodded. They'll ask about your parents, about the homestead, about what happened. I can talk, Annie said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Good. The Reverend drank his coffee, closed his eyes. Then we've got a fighting chance. That evening, Ezra mentioned something to the Reverend. Casual, like it didn't matter much. Tom Brennan left me half his herd when he died. Verbal will. Couple of the drovers heard it. Reverend looked up. How much? $2,100 worth. Did you claim it? No. Why not? Ezra looked at Annie. She was brushing down Beartrack's horse, gentle, careful. Wasn't the right time, he said. The Reverend studied his face. You've been owed that money for 3 years. Yes. And you never collected? No. Why are you telling me this now? Ezra poured himself more coffee. The smell of it was bitter and strong. Because when Good says I'm fighting for the land because I'm after money, I want you to know the truth. I've had money coming to me this whole time. Never took it. This ain't about profit. It's about promise. The Reverend nodded slowly. That'll matter. When the time comes, that'll matter a lot. The fire burned low. Stars came out overhead, cold and bright and endless. Tomorrow was March 14th, one day before the deadline. March 15th came cold and bright. The spring cattle market was opening. Every drover in the territory would be there. Every buyer, every settler looking to rebuild their herd after a hard winter. Ezra dressed careful. Clean shirt, his good hat. Annie wore the dress Nora had given her, blue calico, mended but respectable. They rode into Silver Creek at dawn. The streets were packed. Wagons lined up 3 deep at the freight yard. The smell of cattle and dust and coffee from the vendors filled the air. Marcus Tate had converted the loading platform into an auction stand. Cattle pens stretched out behind it. 200 head at least. More coming in every hour. Ezra saw faces he knew, drovers he'd ridden with, men who'd shared coffee and trail dust. They nodded to him. Some looked away. Good was already there, standing near the platform. He wore a black suit, gold watch chain gleaming in the sunlight. 3 men in lawyer clothes stood beside him. Deputy Webb stood off to one side. His face was carefully neutral. Nora appeared at Ezra's elbow. The federal investigator didn't make it. Roads washed out south of Helena. Ezra's jaw tightened. So we're on our own. Not entirely. She nodded toward the crowd. Half these drovers knew Tom Brennan. They'll remember. Reverend Ashford climbed onto the platform. He carried the church ledger under his arm. Beartrack followed him. The elder's buckskin coat drew stares. Marcus Tate stepped forward. He was the auctioneer. His job was to run the market. But today his face was serious. Before we start the spring bidding, Tate said. His voice carried across the yard. There's a matter needs settling. Ezra Calloway's got something to say. We'll hear him, seeing as he's a drover of 20 years and never sold a false bill. Ezra felt Annie's hand slip into his. He squeezed it once. Then he lifted her onto the platform and climbed up after her. The crowd pressed closer. 50 people. 70, more coming. Ezra pulled the torn deed from his pocket, held it up so everyone could see. This is a homestead deed, he said. His voice was steady, loud enough to reach the back. Belongs to Thomas and Eliza Brennan, filed in 68, 320 acres just north of the rail line. Good stepped forward. That deed's been legally abandoned. I've got federal documentation. You got forged papers, Ezra said. Backdated by a bribed clerk named Oswald Pierce. Territorial office confirmed it. The crowd murmured. Heads turned. Good's face went red. That's slander. It's truth, and truth's what we're here for. Ezra looked at the drovers. Some of you knew Tom Brennan, rode with him, trailed cattle with him. You know what kind of man he was. A voice from the crowd. Tom was honest. Never knew him to lie. Another voice. Good man, hard worker. Ezra nodded. Tom died 3 years ago, his wife with him. Wagon fire on the trail north of here. They left behind one daughter. He put his hand on Annie's shoulder. This is Annie Brennan. She's 8 years old. She was lost for 3 years, living rough in Redemption Flats, till I found her in a blizzard last December. He held up the torn deed again. Someone ripped this deed, took the corner right off, made it look like trash, made her look like a liar. Good's voice cut through. A child with no voice, a drover with no standing, and half a piece of paper. That's your case? No, Ezra looked at the Reverend. That's my case, boss. Ashford stepped forward. He opened the church ledger. I baptized Annie Elizabeth Brennan on June 15, 1868. Her parents were Thomas William Brennan and Eliza Morrison Brennan. Witnesses included myself and Chief Joseph Beartrack of the Crow Nation. He held the ledger up. Names, dates, signatures, all recorded legal. Beartrack moved to the front of the platform. His presence silenced the crowd. I was there when this child was born, he said. His English was careful, accented but clear. I was there when her father negotiated treaty water rights. Good man, respected the old boundaries, bah. He pulled out the treaty map, unrolled it. This shows the Brennan homestead, exact location, exact size, signed by the United States government and the Crow Nation in 1868. The crowd pressed closer to see. I was also there, Beartrack continued, the night Thomas and Eliza Brennan died. I found their wagon the next morning. 3 bodies. They weren't abandoning their claim. They were running from claim jumpers. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. Good's voice rose. A savage's testimony? That's what you're basing this on? Beartrack turned to face him. I have a name. Chief Joseph Beartrack, and my word is witnessed by treaty law, signed by your government, your president. Ezra spoke again. But there's more. Tom Brennan was my trail partner, Texas to Montana, 4 months on the trail. Before he died, he left me half his herd, verbal will, worth $2,100. He paused. Let that sink in. I never claimed it, never took a dime. For 3 years, that money's been sitting there. Anyone here can check the records. He looked straight at Good. You said I'm fighting for Annie's land because I'm after money. But I've had money coming to me this whole time. Never touched it. This ain't about profit. It's about promise. The crowd was silent now, every eye on the platform. Annie stepped forward. Her voice was small, but it carried. My papa said family is who you'd walk through a blizzard for. She looked up at Ezra. He walked through a blizzard for me. The words hung in the air. Deputy Webb climbed onto the platform. I need to see that ledger. Reverend handed it over. Webb read it slow. His finger traced the entries, then Webb pulled something from his pocket, a small piece of paper, yellowed, torn on one edge. Found this 2 days ago, Webb said, in Hiram Good's office safe, during a search authorized by territorial warrant. He held it up next to the torn deed. The corner fit perfectly. The crowd erupted. Good's face went white. I don't know how. You tore the deed, Webb said. Kept the corner as insurance. Probably figured you'd destroy it later, but you didn't. A figure pushed through the crowd. Older man, gray beard. He wore a federal badge. I'm Agent Harrison, Territorial Land Office. He looked at Good. Mr. Pierce confessed yesterday, gave us a list of every claim you manipulated. 23 properties across 3 counties. He pulled out handcuffs. Hiram Good, you're under arrest for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy to defraud the federal government. 2 deputies moved forward. Good backed up. His face was twisted with rage. You can't. I built this town. I brought the railroad. You brought corruption, Harrison said. They cuffed him. Good lunged toward the edge of the platform. I'll fight this. I've got lawyers. I've got money. He tried to run, made it 3 steps before Webb tackled him. They went down hard in the mud. The crowd roared approval. They pulled Good to his feet. Mud on his fine suit, gold watch chain broken. He looked at Annie. You're just a child. Nobody. You don't deserve. She deserves her parents' land, Ezra said, and she's got it. They dragged Good away. His voice echoed back across the yard until it faded into nothing. Agent Harrison climbed onto the platform. In light of the evidence presented, baptismal record, treaty documentation, witness testimony, and the recovery of the stolen deed fragment, I'm reinstating the Brennan homestead claim, effective immediately. He looked at Ezra. Mr. Calloway, given your relationship with the deceased and your clear investment in the child's welfare, I'm appointing you temporary legal guardian pending formal adoption proceedings. The crowd erupted again, cheering, hats thrown in the air. Marcus Tate stepped forward, shook Ezra's hand. Your herd stands at full count, and if you're staying on to run the Brennan place, we'll need a good foreman. Ezra looked down at Annie. What do you think? Annie threw her arms around his waist, held on tight. I'll take that as a yes, Ezra said. The spring market opened. Cattle were bought and sold, money changed hands, life went on, but Ezra barely noticed. He was too busy watching Annie. She was talking to Reverend Ashford, her voice growing stronger with every word. Nora appeared beside him. You did it. We did it, Ezra said. All of us. What now? Ezra looked north, toward the homestead, toward 320 acres of grassland and possibility. Now we go home. They rode north 3 days later, Ezra and Annie on one horse, Beartrack on another. Nora followed in a wagon loaded with supplies. Reverend Ashford brought up the rear. The homestead sat in a valley with hills on 3 sides. The cabin was half collapsed, roof caved in, door hanging by one hinge, but the land was good, green grass pushing up through the brown, the smell of earth and growth and promise. Annie slid down from the horse, walked to the cabin slow, touched the doorframe. "Mama planted flowers here," she said. "Yellow ones. Papa said they made the place feel like home." Ezra came up beside her. "We'll plant more. Soon as the ground warms up proper." They spent the first day clearing debris. The second day, neighbors started arriving. Men Ezra had never met, families from surrounding homesteads. They brought tools, lumber, food. "Heard what you did," one man said. "Standing up to good. That took spine." By the third day, they were raising the cabin frame. The sound of hammers rang across the valley, the smell of fresh-cut pine mixed with wood smoke from the cook fire. Annie helped where she could, carrying water, holding nails, learning. On the fourth day, Marcus Tate rode out. He brought papers, legal documents with federal seals. "Adoption's being processed," he said. "Should be finalized by June. Till then, you're her legal guardian." Ezra signed where Tate pointed. His hand was steady. "One more thing," Tate said. He pulled out a bank draft. "Your share of Tom Brennan's estate, $2,100, plus 3 years' interest, comes to $2,340. Ezra stared at the paper. "I didn't fight for this." I know. That's why you're getting it." Tate smiled. "Tom would have wanted you to have it. Use it to build something good here." After Tate left, Ezra showed Annie the draft. "This was your daddy's. Now it's ours. What should we do with it?" Annie thought for a long moment. "Build the cabin, buy cattle, make it like it was." She paused. "Like Mama and Papa wanted." "That's a good plan." The cabin went up fast. 4 walls, a roof that didn't leak, windows with real glass. By the end of April, it was finished, small but solid. They moved in on May 1st. Annie picked her own room. Ezra took the one that faced east, morning sun through the window. That evening, they ate dinner at a real table. Nora had brought it in the wagon. Reverend Ashford said grace. Bear Track sat at the far end, quiet but present. "To new beginnings," Nora said. She raised her coffee cup. They all drank. After dinner, Ezra found Annie outside. She was standing by the fence line, looking at the cattle grazing in the last light of day. "Tomorrow's branding day," Ezra said. "You ready?" "I think so." "You've been practicing those knots?" "Every day." The next morning, they drove the cattle into the pen. Ezra heated the branding iron in the fire. The smell of hot metal and smoke filled the air. Other ranchers came to help. Marcus Tate, 3 neighbors, even Deputy Webb showed up. "First calf's yours," Ezra said to Annie. "If you want it." Annie nodded. She pulled on the leather gloves Nora had given her. Too big, but they'd do. 2 men wrestled a calf to the ground, held it steady. Annie pulled out her rope, loop under, back through. Just like Ezra had taught her, she tied the calf's legs together. The knot held. The men looked at each other, impressed. Ezra brought the iron. "You want to do it?" Annie took the iron. Heavy in her hands, she pressed it to the calf's hide. The smell of burning hair rose up. The calf bawled, but the men held it steady. When Annie pulled the iron away, the brand was clear, Rocking Bee. The men let the calf go. It scrambled up and ran to its mother. Annie stared at her hands, at the gloves, at the rope still coiled at her feet. Then she looked at Ezra. "I did it." "You did?" "Papa would have been proud." "He would." She was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft but sure. "What do I call you?" Ezra's throat went tight. He'd been waiting for this question, hoping for it, dreading it. "Whatever feels right," he said. Annie looked at the cabin, at the land, at the cattle bearing her father's brand, at the people who'd come to help, at the life they were building together. "Pa," she said, testing the word, seeing how it fit. Ezra had to look away. His eyes were stinging. "Pa," Annie said again, stronger this time. He knelt down, pulled her close. She wrapped her arms around his neck and held on. The sun climbed higher, the branding continued. Smoke rose from the fire. Cattle bawled. Men laughed and worked and told stories. Bear Track caught Ezra's eye across the pen. The elder nodded once. Approval. Respect. Nora was setting out food on a table near the cabin. She looked up and smiled. Reverend Ashford stood on the hillside, marking the spot where they'd plant a stone for Thomas and Eliza, so they'd never be forgotten. Annie stayed close to Ezra's side, working, learning, home. 30 years on, that valley is still the prettiest place on earth. Annie runs 320 acres now, raises cattle and 4 kids of her own. Every one of them learned the drover's knot before they could write their names. Her oldest boy's named Thomas. Her youngest girl's called Eliza. The past doesn't die if you speak its name out loud. Folks ask me sometimes why I stopped that December night. I was heading to market, had a timeline, herd to sell, life to get back to, but I reckon there's timelines and then there's moments. Moments when you see someone the world's decided to ignore, and you got a choice. Keep riding or stop. Stopping's harder, costs more, takes longer. But it's the thing that makes you sleep at night. The law said Annie didn't exist, just a scrap of paper and a silent child. But the law is a tool, and tools can be bent by men who know how to grip them. We bent it back, not with lawyers or money or clever words. We bent it with witnesses, with people who said, I saw her, I baptized her, I knew her daddy, I won't look away. That's what justice is out here, not what's written in a courthouse. It's what a community decides to see. I'm old now, hands don't work like they used to, but I still tie that drover's knot every morning. Muscle memory. Reminds me that some things hold when everything else falls apart. Annie's daughter brought me coffee this morning. Sunrise coming up over the hills, cattle moving slow through green grass, the smell of spring and wood smoke and bread baking in the cabin. She asked me what I was thinking about. I told her the truth. About a girl lost for 3 years. About a stranger who stopped. About how that made all the difference.